Brace yourselves, parents. This one's a doozy.
Here are the quadrilaterals. So quadrilaterals, which is the title of this, what we call tree map, means it has a shape that has four sides, four angles. The first one we have is all the way at the end, the trapezoid. Now, common misconceptions are the trapezoid looks exactly like this one right here, but not always. The true definition of a trapezoid is only one pair of parallel lines. So you can see here are the parallel lines. If these lines went on forever, they would eventually intersect. Whereas over here, we have one pair going up and down, and these would eventually intersect. That is the true definition of a trapezoid. Next up, parallelogram, which in its name says parallel. So we're looking for something that has two pairs of parallel lines, and the opposite sides have to be equal. So in these shapes, we have one pair of parallel lines, top and bottom, another pair of parallel lines, side to side. And all of these have those commonalities. Now the opposite sides are equal. That means the one opposite side of this side is equal to this side, and it's shown by two lines, two lines. So these two are the same. Over here, one line, that means these two are the same. And of course, we have a square, which if a square has all sides the same, then obviously opposite sides are the same. Now, next to the parallelogram, we have a rectangle. If you read very carefully, a rectangle also has two pairs of parallel lines, just like the parallelogram. A rectangle also has opposite sides equal, just like a parallelogram. However, a rectangle has four right angles, and it must have four right angles, whereas a parallelogram, does not have to have four angles. So if you see here, this one's slanted, it has acute and obtuse, whereas all of these have square corners, that right angle. Moving on, we have a rhombus. And I told you this was a doozy, so bear with me. A rhombus has two pairs of parallel sides, 1, 2, and all four sides must be equal, not just opposite sides. All of them have to be the same. So that's represented by the one dash line on all sides, as well as over here. Now, what I always say is, these are like little clubs to get into. Lots of people can get into the parallelogram club, but it's a little harder to get into the rectangle club. And it's a little bit harder to get into the rhombus club. But the most elite and the hardest to get into is the squares. Now, a square is almost like a rhombus, just like a parallelogram is almost like a rectangle. A square has two pairs of parallel sides. All four sides are equal. However, a square also must have four right angles. So if you look over here, we have all four sides equal, right angles, and it has the two pairs of parallel lines. Whereas a rhombus can have angles, right angles, but it doesn't have to. Now, with this being said, when students have to name quadrilaterals, we have to think about all of these rules when we get there. So let's practice how to name quadrilaterals by all of their names. So here's an example of what students might have to do for quadrilaterals. Now in FSA, this very well could be a select all type question. So looking at this shape and using notes, either from, I have a picture sent on Dojo of my tree map, and I'm also sending home a page in the math book. And students also have their notes in their journals. So please, please, please direct your students to use the notes in the journal and to go through every quadrilateral to make sure they've hit every single one and they looked for the true definition. We're not talking about kindergarten rectangles here. We're talking about 4th grade rectangles. So if you go through the notes, first thing we have is a quadrilateral. Does it have 4 sides? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Does it have 4 angles? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Then it is a quadrilateral. So that's one. Well, next is the trapezoid. A trapezoid by definition has one pair of parallel sides. So let's look. Here's one pair of parallel sides, but we also have another pair of parallel sides. So this cannot be a trapezoid because a trapezoid can only have one. So that's out. Next is a parallelogram, which a parallelogram has 2 pairs of parallel sides and opposite sides are equal. So let's check that one out. Parallelogram, 2 pairs of parallel sides. Here's 1, 2. Opposite sides equal. Well, these have 3 lines, and this has 3 lines, and they're opposite, so those are equal. Here's the opposite sides. They each have 1 line, so those are equal. So by definition, we are also it is also, I should say, parallelogram. Okay, next up is a rectangle. Now remember, a rectangle has the same qualities as a parallelogram, except it must have right angles. Well, here's my little squares in the corners, which means it has a perfect square corner. So this must be a rectangle. They have to go through every single one because sometimes students like to just, oh, no, not this, not this. But make sure you go through all of them and you look at the rules of each. So next up, rhombus. Okay, well, a rhombus has 2 pairs of parallel sides. We've already concluded that. And all 4 sides must be equal. Well, this has 3 lines and this has 1. So those sides are not equal. Therefore, this can't be a rhombus. So that one's out. Next up, square. Well, let's look. Square has to have opposite sides parallel. We established that. All sides equal. Well, that was out from the rhombus. So the 3 names of this shape is quadrilateral, parallelogram, rectangle. Okay, now if you're still with me, we're going to do another shape that's a little more intense than the one that we just did previously. So looking at this shape, again, go through every possibility, look at all the rules to really decide all the names of this shape. First up, quadrilateral. 4 sides, 4 angles. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a quadrilateral. Next, trapezoid. So a trapezoid has only 1 pair of parallel sides. So if I look here, well, here's 1 pair, but this one has 2. So trapezoid is out because trapezoid can only have 1, no more. Next, parallelogram. Well, parallelogram, if you look at the notes, must have opposite sides of equal length and 2 pairs of parallel sides. Well, we just identified the 2 pairs of parallel sides, so let's see if the opposite sides are equal. This has 1 line, opposite side has 1, so those are equal. Over here has 1, and over here has 1, so those opposite sides are equal. So we have all the qualifications for a parallelogram. Next up, we're going to look for a rectangle. Well, a rectangle has to have everything a parallelogram has, except it must have right angles. Well, this is an acute, if I look at it closely, and I can even draw the angle inside here. See, it's closing up. So that's an acute, not right. So rectangle's out. Next up, rhombus. A rhombus must have two pairs of parallel sides. Check, we established that. It must have not opposite sides, all sides equal. Well, if we look here, they each have one line. That means they're all the same. So we're good there for a rhombus. Finally, we have a square. So if it's a rhombus, it could possibly be a square. The only difference between a rhombus and a square is a square has to have right angles. So this does not have right angles because we have this acute angle here. So it is not a square. So the possible names of this shape are quadrilateral, parallelogram, rhombus. All right, well, if you made it this far, congratulations. I know quadrilaterals are a little difficult, but if you follow the rules and you look through all the notes and you just go one at a time, makes it a lot easier. Thanks for hanging out with me.